You know, people say that the way your children treat you when you're old tells you everything about how well you raised them. I used to believe that. I used to hold on to the idea that if I gave my daughter everything, my time, my strength, my sacrifices, then one day she'd give me back something priceless. Love, respect, maybe a little gratitude. But life doesn't always play out the way you imagine it will. Let me tell you what happened to me, because it still stings, and yet, it also changed the course of my life forever. My name is Michael Grant. I'm 62 years old. I'm not a wealthy businessman or some flashy millionaire. I'm a retired construction foreman. I spent my life building other people's homes while barely having enough to patch up my own roof. But I never complained, because the only thing that mattered to me was my family. Especially my daughter, Emily. Emily wasn't just my daughter. She was my reason to keep going after my wife, Laura, passed away when Emily was just 12. I can still remember standing in that hospital hallway, watching Emily clutch my hand and cry, and I made her a promise right there. "You'll never be alone, sweetheart. I'll give you everything I've got." And I meant it. For years, I worked double shifts. I skipped vacations, I wore old boots until the soles had holes in them, and I drove a rusty old truck that coughed black smoke every morning. But Emily always had what she needed. School trips, prom dresses, college tuition, I covered it all. Not because I had to, but because I wanted her to have a chance at a better life. And she did. Emily grew up to be successful, confident, and independent. She married a man named Jason Carter, who works in finance. Jason's the type of guy who always looks polished, always has the newest phone in his pocket, and who talks about stocks like they're the weather. He's a nice enough guy on the surface, but I could see that money and appearances mattered more to him than anything else. Emily seemed happy, so I bit my tongue and stayed in my lane. Then came Jason's 35th birthday. Emily invited me to their house for a big celebration. I showed up with my usual nervous smile, holding a small gift I'd picked out for him. Their home looked like something from a magazine. Marble countertops, sleek furniture, music humming softly in the background. Neighbors and friends filled the place with laughter. At the center of it all was Emily, beaming, with that same sparkle in her eyes she had as a little girl. She made a big announcement, pulling Jason out to the driveway where everyone followed. And there it was, a shiny, brand-new black truck with a red bow on top. Jason's jaw dropped. He hugged her, kissed her, lifted her off her feet while everyone clapped and cheered. I stood there in the crowd, smiling, clapping along. But inside, I felt something I didn't expect, an ache. Because I thought, wow, she really went all out for him. And part of me was proud. But another part whispered, would she ever do something like that for me? After the truck reveal, Emily turned to me with a smaller box wrapped in gold paper. "Dad, this is for you," she said, smiling sweetly. I opened it carefully. Inside was a simple photo frame. I held it up, waiting to see what memory she had chosen to put inside. A wedding photo? A picture of us together? Maybe even one of Laura, her mom. But the frame was empty, just glass and cardboard. "Thought you could put whatever you like in it," Emily said casually before hugging Jason again. I smiled, nodded, and whispered, "Thank you, sweetheart." But deep down, it felt like she had given me nothing, like she hadn't thought about it at all. Now, don't get me wrong, I didn't want a car, I didn't want luxury. All I wanted was a reminder that I mattered, that I wasn't just a guest in her world. But that frame, empty blank, felt like a reflection of how she saw me. And you know what I did? Nothing. I said nothing. I smiled, I hugged her back, and I went home that night with the empty frame on the passenger seat beside me, staring at it at every stoplight. But here's where the story turns. Because 6 months later, I invited Emily to my lawyer's office. She thought it was just a routine meeting. She thought everything was normal. But when she walked in and saw the documents I placed in front of her, her hands started to shake. That was the day my silence ended, and her world began to crack. When I think back on my life, I don't see trophies, awards, or fancy vacations. What I see are calloused hands, long nights under construction lights, and the sound of my daughter's laughter echoing through a small house that was barely holding together. My name's Michael Grant, and I'll be honest with you, I wasn't the smartest man, I wasn't the richest man, but I was determined to be the kind of father who never quit on his child. After my wife, Laura, passed away, the world felt like it had lost its color. Laura wasn't just my wife, she was the glue that held us together. She had this gentle way of making every room feel warmer just by walking in. When cancer took her, Emily was 12 years old, and suddenly I was both father and mother in a house that felt half empty. I didn't know how to braid hair, I didn't know how to comfort a little girl when she woke up crying for her mom, but I learned. I had to. I worked construction during the day, and at night I studied how to make her favorite meals from Laura's old cookbooks. I'd sit at the kitchen table flipping through greasy pages, trying to recreate Laura's spaghetti sauce. Emily would wrinkle her nose and say, "It's not the same as Mom's," and I'd just laugh because she was right. But little by little, she stopped comparing, and she started smiling again. Our house was modest, nothing special, but I made sure it was a place where she felt safe. Birthdays were small, but full of love. Christmas mornings meant hot cocoa and second-hand gifts that I wrapped like they were treasures. I didn't have much money, but I had determination. And when Emily told me she wanted to go to college, something no one in my family had ever done, I worked overtime, picked up side jobs, and cut corners on everything for myself. Shoes with holes? Duct tape fixed that. Old truck breaking down? I patched it up with whatever I could find. But Emily, she had what she needed. By the time she graduated, I was the proudest man alive. Sitting in that audience, clapping louder than anyone else, I remember thinking, "Laura, I did it. We did it." Emily was the first Grant to get a degree. That diploma wasn't just hers. It was a symbol of everything we'd fought for. When Emily met Jason, I wanted to like him. He was tall, confident, and the kind of man who always had a plan. At first, I thought, good, she's with someone stable. But over time, I noticed how much he talked about money, cars, and status. Jason was the type who measured success by what was in your driveway, not what was in your heart. Still, I bit my tongue. If Emily was happy, that was all that mattered. But slowly, something changed between Emily and me. She started calling less. Visits became shorter. Instead of stopping by for dinner, she'd say, "Dad, Jason and I are so busy this week, maybe next time." At first, I shrugged it off. Kids grow up, they get busy, I told myself. But deep down, I felt this gnawing fear, that the little girl who once clung to my leg and begged me not to leave for work was slipping away. I'd sit in my recliner at night, staring at the quiet house, flipping through old photo albums. Pictures of Emily blowing out candles, playing in the yard, her prom dress. In every photo, I could see how much I'd poured into her life. And now? Now I felt like an old book collecting dust on a shelf, there if she needed me, but mostly forgotten. There was this one evening that really stuck with me. I called Emily just to hear her voice, just to ask how she was doing. She answered, cheerful at first, but when I suggested coming over for dinner, she hesitated. "Dad, Jason and I already have plans. Rain check?" she said. I told her it was fine, but when I hung up, I sat in that silent kitchen for what felt like hours. The pot roast I'd made sat untouched on the stove. I ate alone, trying to swallow more than just the food. You see, loneliness isn't about being alone. It's about realizing the people you love most don't need you anymore. That was my life before Jason's birthday. A man who had given everything, waiting quietly in the background, hoping for just a little sign that his daughter still saw him. Not as a burden, not as a shadow, but as her father. I didn't know it then, But the birthday party, that empty photo frame, would be the spark that lit a fire inside me. A fire that would burn away all the silence I'd kept for years. Jason's 35th birthday was supposed to be just another family gathering. At least, that's how I thought of it. Emily had invited me a week before, her voice quick and distracted on the phone. "Dad, we're throwing a party for Jason next Saturday. You'll come, right?" Of course, I said yes. I always said yes. That Saturday afternoon, I put on my best shirt, the one I saved for special occasions, and drove my old pickup across town. Their neighborhood was one of those places where every lawn looks like it's been trimmed with scissors and every driveway has cars so shiny they blind you in the sun. Pulling up in my rusted truck, I already felt out of place. But I told myself, it doesn't matter. Emily's happy, that's what counts. When I walked into their house, laughter and music spilled out like I had stepped into another world. The kitchen counters were lined with platters of food, expensive wine bottles, and decorations that matched a theme I couldn't quite figure out. Friends of Jason's, mostly co-workers in suits and polished shoes, clinked glasses and laughed loudly. Emily greeted me with a quick hug and a kiss on the cheek. "Dad, you made it," she said. I smiled, even though I noticed how her eyes darted back toward Jason almost immediately, like I was just a guest on her checklist. Jason, standing tall in the center of the room, had that self-satisfied grin plastered across his face. People surrounded him, patting his back, wishing him well. He looked every bit the king of his castle. I found a quiet corner holding on to the small gift I had bought for him, a leather wallet. Simple, practical, not flashy, but I thought it might mean something useful at least. After an hour of chatter, Emily called everyone outside. "We have a surprise for the birthday boy," she announced, her voice bubbling with excitement. People followed her to the driveway, and I went along, curious. There, under the afternoon sun, sat a brand-new black truck with a giant red bow on the hood. Jason's eyes widened, and for a moment, he looked like a kid on Christmas morning. "Are you serious?" he asked, his voice cracking with joy. Emily tossed him the keys. "Happy birthday, babe," she said. He swept her into his arms, kissing her as the crowd cheered. Cameras flashed, people clapped, and Jason beamed like he had just won the lottery. I clapped too, forcing a smile. But deep down, my chest tightened. I thought back to my own truck, sitting crooked in their driveway, held together by duct tape and prayers. And in that moment, I wasn't jealous, I was invisible. When the excitement settled, Emily turned to me with a smaller package. "This is for you, Dad," she said casually, almost as an afterthought. I took the box, the eyes of a few curious guests flicking toward me. Slowly, I tore the wrapping. Inside was a simple wooden photo frame. Empty, just glass and cardboard. For a second, I froze, waiting for her to laugh and pull out the real gift, or to hand me a photo to slip inside. But nothing came. She just smiled and said, "Thought you could put whatever picture you like in it." Then she turned back toward Jason, who was already revving the engine of his new truck for everyone to admire. I swallowed hard and forced a nod. "Thank you, sweetheart," I said softly. But inside, something cracked. Not because of the frame itself, it wasn't about the money or the size of the gift. It was what it represented. An empty frame. A hollow gesture. A sign that she hadn't thought about me, not really, not the man who had given everything for her. I held that frame as conversations swirled around me, as people admired the truck, as Jason basked in his spotlight. I was there, but I wasn't there. I was just background noise. Later, when everyone went back inside, I slipped out early. No one noticed. Not Emily, not Jason, not the crowd of friends. I walked across their manicured lawn, climbed into my old truck, and set the empty frame on the passenger seat. It sat there staring at me, mocking me all the way home. At every red light, I caught myself looking at it. I imagined slipping in a photo of Emily as a little girl, smiling with frosting on her face at her 7th birthday. I imagined Laura, her soft hands holding Emily's shoulders, both of them looking at me with love. But when I looked back down, it was still empty, just glass and cardboard. That night, I put the frame on the kitchen table and stared at it for a long time. I didn't cry. I'd run out of tears years ago, but I felt something colder, sharper, the realization that I no longer had a place in my daughter's world. I didn't say a word to Emily about how it made me feel. I stayed silent. But in that silence, a seed was planted. A seed of hurt, of betrayal, of quiet determination. And over the next 6 months, that seed would grow into something she never saw coming. For weeks after Jason's birthday party, that empty photo frame sat on my kitchen table like a scar I couldn't stop staring at. Every time I walked past it, I felt the same knot tighten in my chest. Some nights, I'd catch myself picking it up, holding it, running my fingers across the smooth glass, almost daring it to hold a memory that wasn't there. But it never did. It wasn't about the frame itself. It was about what it meant. An empty space, a thoughtless gesture, a reminder that I didn't belong in my daughter's world anymore. I told myself, don't overthink it, Mike, let it go. She's busy, she didn't mean anything by it. But the truth was harder to swallow. The truth was, I had poured my life into raising her, and in return, I had become invisible. One evening, about a month after the party, I sat at my old wooden table flipping through photo albums. Laura's smile, Emily's school portraits, her graduation cap, tilted on her head as she beamed at me. These pictures told the story of a man who had given everything. And now, I realized, the last chapter of that story was about to be written. Not by Emily, not by Jason, but by me. The next morning, I picked up the phone and called Robert Hayes, my lawyer and an old friend. Robert and I had gone to high school together, and over the years he'd helped me with odds and ends, paperwork for the house, a few investments I barely understood. He was one of the few people I trusted completely. "Mike," he said when he answered, his voice deep and steady, "it's been a while. What can I do for you?" I hesitated. The words felt heavy, but I pushed them out. "Rob, I need to talk about making some changes to my will." There was a pause on the line. Then, "All right. Why don't you come in tomorrow morning?" When I walked into his office the next day, the place smelled of leather and old books. Robert sat behind his desk, glasses perched on his nose. He looked me over like he could read the weight I carried. "You sure about this, Mike? You're not the kind of guy to make decisions in anger." I shook my head. "This isn't anger, Rob. This is clarity." He leaned back. "Tell me what happened." So I told him. I told him about the party, about the new truck, about the empty photo frame. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I just laid it out plain, the way a man tells the truth when he's finally too tired to dress it up. Robert sighed when I finished. "Mike, I've known you a long time. You've given everything to that girl." "And what did I get back, Rob?" I asked quietly. "An empty frame, a reminder that I don't matter. I won't beg for her love. Not anymore." He nodded slowly. "So, what do you want to do?" I looked him in the eye. "I want to take control of my legacy. I don't want everything I've worked for to end up in the hands of people who don't value it. I want it to mean something. I want Laura's name to mean something long after I'm gone." And that's when the plan took shape. Instead of leaving my savings, my property, my investments to Emily, I would create a charitable trust in Laura's name. It would support scholarships for kids who grew up like Emily did, kids with big dreams and small wallets, kids who needed a chance. Robert studied me carefully. "Mike, this is a big step. Once you sign these papers, there's no going back. Are you absolutely certain?" I thought about it. About every late night I'd worked, every dollar I'd saved, every sacrifice I'd made. I thought about sitting alone at my kitchen table, while my daughter built a life where I no longer had a seat. I'm certain, I said. I don't want bitterness, Rob. I just want peace. And if Emily couldn't give me respect when I'm alive, then maybe she doesn't deserve the responsibility when I'm gone. Robert slid the paperwork across the desk. Then let's get to work. As I signed my name, stroke by stroke, I felt something strange. Not sadness, not anger. Relief. For the first time in years, I felt like I was in control again. Like I was choosing my own ending. I didn't tell Emily, I didn't hint at it. I went on with life as if nothing had changed. We spoke occasionally on the phone, polite, shallow conversations about the weather, about how busy she and Jason were. But inside, I carried the quiet knowledge that a storm was coming, and 6 months later, I would invite her into Robert's office. She would sit across from me, smiling, unaware, and when the papers were placed in front of her, her hands would begin to shake. 6 months after that birthday party, I picked up the phone and called Emily. "Sweetheart," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I need you to come with me to Robert Hayes's office tomorrow." 10 o'clock. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "The lawyer? Is something wrong, Dad?" "No," I replied simply. "I just need you there." She agreed, though her voice carried a trace of confusion. The next morning, I arrived at Robert's office early. I sat in the waiting area, my hands resting on my knees, staring at the floor. My chest felt tight, but my mind was calm. I had spent months carrying this secret, and today it would finally come into the light. At 10 o'clock sharp, Emily walked in. She wore a neat blazer, her hair pulled back, looking every bit the professional she had become. She gave me a quick hug, her perfume faint but familiar. "Dad, what's this about?" she asked, searching my face. "You'll see," I said. Robert ushered us into his office. The room smelled of old leather and paper, the walls lined with books that whispered of long-forgotten cases. We sat across from Robert at his heavy oak desk. Emily crossed her legs, tapping her shoe nervously. Robert cleared his throat. "Thank you both for coming. Michael asked me to prepare some documents, and he felt it was important for you to be here, Emily." Her eyes flicked to me. "Documents? Dad, is this about your house? About medical stuff?" I shook my head. "Just listen." Robert slid a folder across the desk and opened it. The first page was a legal document with my signature at the bottom. Emily leaned forward to read it, and as her eyes scanned the page, her confident expression began to unravel. Her voice trembled. This is your will?" "Yes," I said evenly. She kept reading, her lips parted. You left everything to a charitable trust? In Mom's name?" I nodded slowly. "That's right." Her face paled. Her hands began to shake. "Dad, no, this has to be a mistake. I'm your daughter. You've always said everything you had was for me." I leaned forward, my voice quiet but firm. And for 30 years it was. Every dollar I earned, every choice I made, every sacrifice, I did it for you, Emily. But then I realized something. When you gave Jason that truck and you handed me a frame with nothing in it, it wasn't about the gift. It was about the message. To you, I had become nothing. Empty. Her eyes filled with tears. "Dad, that's not true. I love you." I swallowed hard. "Maybe you do. But love without respect, without thought, it's just words. That frame sits on my table every day, and every day it reminds me of what I mean to you. And I decided I won't let my life's work vanish into indifference." She looked at Robert desperately. "There has to be something we can do. He can't just take it all away." Robert's voice was calm, professional. "Emily, your father is of sound mind. These documents are legal and binding. This is his decision." Emily turned back to me, her cheeks wet. "Dad, please, you can't do this to me. I'm your only child." I felt the weight of her words, but I didn't flinch. "You're my child, Emily. You always will be. But your mother deserves to be remembered, and children who need help deserve a chance. That's what this trust will do. This isn't punishment, it's purpose." Her voice cracked, rising louder. "But what about me? Don't I matter?" My own voice broke as I answered, "You mattered more than anything." But when I looked at that empty frame, I realized I no longer mattered to you, and I can't leave everything I built in the hands of someone who doesn't see me. The silence in the room was heavy. Emily covered her face with her hands, her shoulders trembling. For the first time in years, I saw my daughter not as the polished professional, not as Jason's wife, but as the little girl who used to cry for me at night. But I didn't waver. I couldn't. After a long pause, Emily whispered through her tears, "I didn't know it hurt you that much." I took a deep breath. "It's not too late to fill that frame, Emily, but you'll have to decide what you put in it." With that, I stood, leaving the documents on Robert's desk. My legs felt heavy, but my heart felt strangely light. As I walked out of the office, I didn't look back. Walking out of Robert's office that day, I felt a strange mix of emotions swirling inside me. Relief, sorrow, and something I hadn't felt in years, control. For so long, I had been quietly swallowing my hurt, nodding politely, while I felt myself fading into the background of my daughter's life. But when those documents hit the table, when Emily saw the truth in black and white, the silence finally broke. I didn't do it to hurt her. I need to make that clear. I didn't sit down with Robert and change my will out of spite. I did it because I realized something that day she gave Jason the truck and me an empty frame. Respect isn't bought with sacrifices. Love isn't proven by what you gave yesterday. It's shown by how you treat someone today. When I got home that evening, I walked into my quiet little house. The empty frame still sat on my kitchen table. I picked it up, turned it over in my hands, and for the first time in 6 months I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel invisible. Instead, I felt peace. I pulled an old photo from my album, a picture of Laura holding Emily when she was just a toddler, her hair tied in little bows, her cheeks round with laughter. Laura's smile lit up the photo, and Emily's tiny hands clung to her like she was the whole world. I slipped that picture into the frame and set it on the mantel. For the first time, the frame wasn't empty anymore, and neither was I. The days that followed were quiet. Emily called a few times, her voice softer than before. The first call, she didn't mention the will at all. She just asked, "How are you, Dad?" It was short, but different. There was something fragile in her tone, something I hadn't heard in years. Another time, she came by the house. She looked around, noticing the old photos, the worn furniture, the signs of a man who had built a life from hard work. She sat across from me, her hands folded tightly, and said, "I'm sorry." I didn't press her. I didn't ask her to explain, didn't demand tears or promises. I just nodded and said, "I know," because sometimes that's enough. I don't know if she'll ever truly understand what that empty frame meant to me. Maybe she will, maybe she won't. But what I do know is this: my legacy no longer depends on her understanding. It no longer depends on whether she values me in the way I once begged for. My legacy now has a purpose of its own, one that will live on in scholarships, in young people chasing dreams, in Laura's name carried forward with honor. I realized something else, too. For so long, I thought my job as a father was to keep giving, to keep sacrificing, until there was nothing left. But being a father isn't about emptying yourself until you disappear. It's about teaching lessons, even the hard ones. And maybe, just maybe, this was the last lesson I had to give Emily, that love without respect isn't enough, and that people who matter to you should never be made to feel invisible. The truth is, children grow up. They get busy. They make choices we don't always understand. And sometimes they forget the hands that built the foundation under their feet. That's life. But as parents, we don't have to let that forgetfulness erase our worth. We don't have to beg to be seen. So, what did I learn? I learned that silence isn't always strength. Sometimes silence allows people to take you for granted, and sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is finally speak, not with words, but with action. When I look at that photo frame now, I don't see emptiness. I see Laura's eyes, Emily's laughter, and a reminder of why I gave everything in the first place. And I know that even if Emily never fully grasps the weight of what happened in Robert's office, I did what was right for me, for Laura, and for the legacy we built together. If there's one thing I want anyone listening to my story to take away, it's this: never measure your worth by someone else's attention. Never let someone else's neglect define who you are. Love deeply, give freely, but when the day comes that you're handed an empty frame, don't ignore what it means. Fill it yourself, with your own purpose, with your own peace. Because at the end of the day, respect isn't about grand gestures or shiny cars. Respect is about the little things. The thought, the care, the effort to make someone feel seen. And if you're not given that respect, you have every right to choose where your love and your legacy will go. I may not have driven away from that office in a brand new truck, but I walked away with something far more valuable: the knowledge that my story, my sacrifices, and my love will not be forgotten. And that to me is worth more than anything Emily or Jason could have ever put in a box. So that's my story. A story about love, respect, and learning that sometimes silence isn't enough. If it made you think, if it touched something in you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed this video, do me a favor, hit the like button. It really helps more people find these stories. Share this video with someone who might need a reminder that respect matters more than money or gifts. And most importantly, leave a comment below. Tell me what you would have done if you were in my shoes. I read every single one, and your perspective matters. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next story. Thanks for spending this time with me today. Until next time, take care of yourself, and remember, never let anyone make you feel invisible.